prepared to find out what waits beyond reality. It's time to plunge into the abyss from which there is no return. In the silence broken only by your own heartbeat, darkness and horrors capable of shocking even the bravest lie in wait. Are you ready to face what hides in the shadows? What dark force pierces the silence? And what happens when every rustle becomes a cry of despair? Can you withstand the intense fear that becomes palpable and overwhelming? What if something around the corner can shatter your reality? In this world, every step brings you closer to the unknown horror, and every breath is a harbinger of unimaginable evil. Hold on tight and don't look away. The darkness will consume you.
The heroine of our story is a young woman named Helen. She worked in a large city, and her life was filled with constant hustle and unbearable stress. Each day began and ended in a hurried rhythm, where every moment was dedicated to work, obligations, and personal struggles. But this evening was special. The evening was overcast and gloomy, with rain continuously pouring from the sky. Helen had finished her long and grueling shift and was heading to her small hometown, which was a few hours away. She hoped that this trip would be a true escape and allow her to relax. However, instead, this trip turned into a real nightmare that would change her life forever. The tough day at work had left Helen physically and emotionally drained, but she was glad to return home to her small hometown, where everything seemed calmer and cozier. Her old used car, which had been repaired numerous times, still reliably served her. She had conducted a thorough check before the trip, checked the fuel level, tire pressure, and oil condition. After that, she bought some snacks, placed a thermos with hot coffee on the front seat, and took a few books to avoid boredom on the road. The evening was peacefully melancholic, with rain falling in fine drops, creating a pleasant backdrop for her journey. Helen enjoyed how her favorite music, playing at full volume, helped her relax. But with each passing kilometer, her sense of comfort and tranquility was gradually replaced by an intrusive and invisible fear. The sky began to close in with heavy leaden clouds, and the wind, which soon turned into a full-blown storm, created a sense that something terrible was approaching. Have you ever felt like something invisible starts to watch you, as if darkness itself comes alive? After a few hours of driving, Helen noticed that the evening darkness was becoming denser and more oppressive. The road had tired her, and she decided to take a break at a small gas station that looked abandoned and run down. The gas station stood in the middle of a wasteland, surrounded by darkness, and a terrifying silence prevailed, interrupted only by the loud howling of the wind. The flickering light of the gas station created eerie shadows that seemed to pulsate and move behind her. Have you ever noticed how shadows you see out of the corner of your eye start to move and terrify you? Helen got out of the car and approached the building, which was covered in a layer of dust and cobwebs. Inside, it was dark and gloomy, and the peeling counter and old displays looked as if they hadn't been touched by human hands for decades. The smell of dampness and mold filled the air, and Helen felt her inner voice warning her that something was not right here. She bought a drink and, returning to the car, noticed that the back seat looked a little untidy. Maybe she had left it in that state after the last trip. She couldn't remember, but it made her slightly uneasy. What if what you see and what you feel is just the beginning of something much more terrifying? When Helen got back in the driver's seat and continued her journey, it seemed that silence followed the car, broken only by the sounds of the rain. But suddenly she thought she heard a strange creaking from the back seat. It wasn't the usual sound of rain falling on the roof. It was the sound of something living moving inside the car. Helen checked the back seat again and found that everything looked normal. Her anxiety only increased. How do you explain it when something living seems to be moving in the dark with nothing to cause it? As she drove through the dark forest, where the rain fell in thick streams, Helen began to feel that something was wrong. The forest seemed alive, like a real trap, and the rattling branches of the trees seemed to whisper something threatening and unpleasant. The darkness outside the window appeared even denser, and every light signal from the headlights seemed like a distortion of reality, reflecting fear. Every time she looked in the rearview mirror, she thought she saw something moving, a blurry outline, but she couldn't understand what it was. Have you ever felt that reality is so distorted that you can't distinguish what is real from what is an illusion? The noise from the back seat grew more frequent and louder. Helen tried to ignore it, thinking it was just the wind or creaking parts of the car. But the sound was too real and disturbing, as if someone was trying to get out of the back seat. Her heart raced in her chest, and her hands trembled on the wheel. With every new creak, her fear grew, and it seemed like someone or something was demanding her attention. How would you feel if you sensed that something unknown was trying to break free from the shadows and capture you? After several hours of driving, Helen decided she needed to make another stop. She found a cozy parking spot under a large tree, which partially sheltered the car from the rain. Once she heard a dull crunch, as if something had slipped across the back seat. Getting out of the car, she tried to calm herself, but suddenly she heard the noise from the back seat again. It seemed like someone was moving, wriggling, and trying to get out. Why does the sound become more distinct and threatening when you try to calm down? Helen opened the back seat door and checked, but there was nothing unusual. Her mind began to fill with dreadful thoughts. What if someone is hiding in my car? What if this isn't just an illusion? Her mind and heart were in turmoil, and it was clearly more than just an unpleasant experience. She saw that the reflection in the rearview mirror was clouded with dark spots that seemed strange and unnatural. How do you deal with everything around you starting to seem so eerie that you can't distinguish reality from a nightmare? After Helen got back behind the wheel, she felt the car had become heavy, as if something invisible was pressing it down. Her fear increased as she noticed that the back seat looked strange again. The darkness outside the window became so thick that it seemed to have swallowed the car entirely. With each turn of the wheels, she noticed that the headlights were reflecting strange distortions on the road, as if something was reflecting off the darkness. It was an effect that created the sensation of terrible, blurry faces appearing before her. What if these distortions are not just light tricks, but images trying to manifest and take you away? The back seat again became the focus of her attention when she noticed a dark figure appearing in the reflection of the mirror. It looked like a face with ruthless, empty eyes watching her. Helen tried to contact someone by phone, but the signal was weak or completely gone. She felt a terrifying cold inside the car, and the temperature dropped sharply. Her breath turned into steam in the cold air. Why does the night darkness become more menacing when you lose connection with the outside world? The night darkness grew increasingly unwelcoming, and Helen felt that something terrible was happening in her car. Suddenly, something appeared on the back seat that looked like bloodstains. Her heart pounded madly, and every sound seemed more frightening than the last. The back seat, now darker than before, began to be covered with even more ominous stains. What do you do when blood and fear become reality, and you realize there's nothing you can do to stop it? When she tried to turn on the heater, it refused to work. The temperature inside the car plummeted, and Helen felt a cold breath on her neck. Her hands trembled as she tried to start the engine, but it didn't respond. The back seat became covered with an even darker liquid, and this time she couldn't mistake it for anything else. It was blood. Once, she heard something heavy rolling across the back seat, and her heart leapt into her throat. How would you feel if each attempt to survive only increased the horror around you? At that moment, Helen felt something grabbing her from behind. Her legs became weak as she realized she couldn't get out of the car. The door was locked, and she frantically tried to open it, but it wouldn't budge. Her hands grew cold with fear. She realized she was being gripped by an invisible force. Her breathing became heavy, Terrifying thoughts filled her mind. What if I can't escape? What if this figure wants to take me with it? What kind of terror would you feel when you realize that something in the shadows might be trapping and not letting you go? The back seat once again distorted and began to look like a human face with a smiling mask. Helen started screaming in terror, but her scream was absorbed by the night's silence. When she tried to escape through the window, she found that this was impossible as well. Her attempts to free herself from fear were in vain. Why can fear and horror squeeze you so much that you can't make a single correct move? By morning, when passers-by found Helen's car, it was empty. The back seat was covered with dark liquid that resembled blood. The car was locked from the inside, and the keys were left inside. No one could explain what happened to Helen, and the locals began to talk about the mysterious missing person. Local police conducted an investigation, but found no clues. They could only state that the car was locked and showed no signs of forced entry. What do you think could have happened to a person who disappeared without a trace and whose car became a field of horror? The legend of Helen became a local myth. People began to report hearing screams and seeing dark silhouettes on the road where her car was found. The mystique and fear surrounding this story grew, and nighttime drivers began to feel an unwelcoming atmosphere when passing this part of the road. It is said that sometimes you can even hear a soft creak from the back seat when the rain falls on the car roof. Why does a nighttime road become a place of fear and danger, where every shadow could hide a secret you don't want to uncover? The mystery of the back seat remains unresolved, and the car, abandoned but full of inexplicable traces, continues to frighten those who dare to come near. Helen's story remains a chilling legend, a tale of terror and the unknown, where each new detail makes the legend even more ominous. Have you ever felt that fear can reach such a level that it becomes an eternal mystery, hidden in every shadow and every dark spot?